Being part of or believing conspiracy theory makes people feel special. They want to believe they're part of a repressed group of people that know better than the rest of us, that they have a special understanding of the world that the general population doesn't. But the truth is a lot simpler. They just fear not knowing the answers, I think, is like a fundamental piece.
That's Tom Lawrence. He's a technologist, YouTuber, and entrepreneur. And in the shadow of the coronavirus, the online world has become even more of a mess. Whether it's conspiracy theories like those around 5G, or the willful refusal to believe objective facts when it comes to this pandemic, we go deep nerd on things like confirmation bias and how folks try to assemble meaning to things, often when there is none. Sometimes we just don't know stuff, but for some, that's not okay to admit. And when these online conspiracies are turned to action, it can put other people and property in danger. Think folks ignoring social distancing guidelines, which has led to outbreaks of COVID-19. Or in England, where cell phone towers are being set on fire. I'm Jer Stays, and this is episode 45 of Your Daily Detroit. Before we get too far, I wanted to quickly thank some new members who have stepped up at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Smart media requires smart support from smart people like Mike, Claire, and Philippe. You are awesome. Okay, on to my conversation with Tom Lawrence. Welcome back to Daily Detroit.
Hey, good to be here.
I mean, the first thing I want to talk about, there is this thing I'm seeing on Facebook that's driving me crazy. Some people are saying that 5G towers are distributing the coronavirus. Can you talk about that, I guess?
Yeah, so we can start with the fact that, well, there's more people on Facebook because they suddenly have found themselves with a lot more time in their hands. And they want to know why they have so much time in their hands. There has to be a cause. There's an agency involved. We can't just accept things easily. And this is the nature of most human beings. We can go, several weeks without food, several days without water, but you can't spend a couple minutes of your time without trying to put meaning to all the things around you. This is why we like the news so much. We're trying to assemble meaning to things. And even when there's not meaning, we can come up with some of them, or at least some people go too far to find it. So we're seeing a lot of people, because of the posts on Facebook and one person says it, next person goes, well, that fits my confirmation bias. I already think there has to be a reason. This person just filled that missing gap of it's that tower that's outside my house. That's what must be raining down this radiation and causing coronas.
Coronas. If only it rained down Corona beers on us.
If only it would rain down Corona beers. I have seen some of the most ridiculous things. And there's two driving forces. There is certainly the ha-has. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people who will post something and do things. And we're seeing this even with Zoom. Who's doing it? Lots of kids. They're Zoom bombing. They're jumping into people's conversations because it's funny. The same thing goes for watch me tease the boomers. I'm going to convince them that we're eating Tide Pods. Look at them go. Look, I made the news because I held up a Tide Pod. This same concept of, in having small young children, my 13-year-old son, and watching them hashtag things boomer remover when they're talking about this entire thing.
Gosh. Yeah.
I mean, they think it's hysterical themselves and saying things, especially younger kids. I mean, who doesn't want to fool the adults? And I'm actually watching some of this drive some of these posts, and then the adults run with it because they're like, and they don't understand science, they don't understand technology. And it helps them even run with this even further with these different, theories and craziness that the coronavirus is caused by 5G.
So I wanted to talk more about 5G as well, because it's something we've been following for a while, especially when I saw a recent newspaper report that talked about 5G in Livonia, and we'll unpack that in a second. But first, I want to put a pin and talk about confirmation bias, because I think that's pivotal to everything that we're talking about here. Let's talk about the concept of confirmation bias and what that is, because I think that's helping drive this misinformation.
Yes. So a lot of people don't stop and use the scientific method. Now, it's science and information has become absolutely more available than it ever has in all of human history. There's not even a need to go to the library anymore. I can just start searching things. But when you're not stopping and really using a scientific method, looking at opposing theories, looking at all the details of it, and then you find some random page created by someone that has magic rocks for sale that fits your confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is people's willingness to accept explanations that fit what they already believe. And this is where a lot of people start. Does 5G cause this? You're not really subjectively looking at what 5G is. You're just finding and landing on more and more websites that show up in search results that go, well, this person fits it. So bookmark that one. This one fits it. Share this one on Facebook. This one fits it. Share this one. Look, I found 5 places that all have the same information that matches my confirmation bias. So you're not really looking at the science behind it.
I was disappointed by a newspaper report that I shared with you a couple of months ago. It never shared the science behind 5G and kind of said, well, this group says that it's a problem. This group says it's not. But there is true facts. There's objective facts in here about 5G and what it is. Can we kind of go through those objective facts?
Yes. Now, from one thing that's really important when you want to have a really good conspiracy theory is you got to start with at least a fact, even if you start skewing what that fact was. So our country's canceling their 5G installs. Well, that seems like a good headline. It must be because of these EMF worries. When the reality is, and this is a very legit concern about 5G. So get ready for this. There are security implications. And this is where I come in working in IT. So 5G has, there's not a lot of vendors that make the equipment that runs 5G, Huawei being at the center of a lot of this, as opposed to some of the administrative rulings that have been going on inside of Washington related to Huawei, is whether or not they have spying equipment in there, whether or not the networking gear physically can spy on us. That is a very legit concern. So there are some security concerns. And this goes through all the different companies producing it. So it's been kind of, well, just a mess. And other countries have slowed it down, and sometimes for that reason are going, wow, we're seeing these security audits of these products and going, they're not coming back good. I believe it was England did one of the more extensive ones. Their own cybersecurity team said, wow, we found we audited, we found a lot of programmatic errors in the systems. We found flaws in the way they do their coding. So all these are very legit concerns of reasons not to have 5G, or at least carefully roll it out, because, well, if a third-party government suddenly could control in some way our cell phone network that we absolutely rely on, because who has a landline nowadays? This is a very legitimate concern, because pretty much everything is transported over cellular data, which is why we want faster cellular data options, bringing in 5G, which is a combination of sometimes technology and sometimes marketing terms spun by the different carriers to tell you that they're the 5G first, even though that's not the most well-defined thing. So there is some truth in companies slowing it, or countries, I should say, and companies slowing it down and having concerns. As far as the other side of it, there's a lot of people that will cite the fact that there's not been a study of it as a reason for concern. And I can also say there's not been a study of whether or not reading Daily Detroit causes cancer or not. I don't know. We need to figure this out. The burden of proof is not on the person to say that. That is one of the common things you'll see when people do a conspiracy theory. Is they're like, well, the burden proves you to prove. I say it's this, and you got to prove me wrong. I say this causes this. Prove me wrong. Well, there's not been a lot of studies done, but they're overall, and this has been confirmed by the 5G confirmed safe by Radiation Watchdog. No scientific evidence that technology to threaten human health, say experts. And this was over on The Guardian. They put a pretty good write-up on this. We have been studying this spectrum for a long time. And who remembers UHF TV? Are you old enough to remember the UHF channels and things like that?
I mean, I was the remote for my dad.
Yeah. With in those big number channels.
Yeah, it was the big number channels. Yep. And it was like the top dial and the lower dial. And recently, because I used to work in broadcast TV, that signal got sold off. If you notice, your TV channels a few years ago changed where they were, and you had to reprogram your TV. And that's in part because the UHF got sold off, or part of it did.
Exactly. And it got sold off to free up spectrum for some of the 5G spectrum. That's actually where some of the spectrum is. So one of the things that people don't realize, you've been exposed to this forever. Since the 60s or whenever they came out with UHFT. I don't know exactly when it started, but it's been around for a while before it was decommissioned. Now, those towers, you remember the size, scale, and scope of those towers, they were huge. So we were basking in this radiation for a long time when you look at it from that perspective. And this is a very science-based perspective. So you were already exposed to it. They shut all these towers down. They broke out the spectrum. Now, the way they're delivering 5G, and this is a legit complaint some business owners have, 5G, because they're using it at a much, much lower power, but it has the ability to send more data. But lower power, more data means I need more of these devices. And so, yes, they are being mounted sometimes to telephone poles. They require they don't have that range that a current cell tower has. So some of the spectrum does need to be mounted. And that's where people really get upset. They're like, but they're going to put them on the telephone poles. And now you're bringing me closer to the exposure when actually you're reducing the wattage that's being broadcast. Because of the inverse proportion by which waves travel and the frequency degrades and the power from them degrades. So yeah, you're kind of blanketing it, but you're actually doing it overall with less power. And there still has been no evidence at all. Matter of fact, we've been using cell phones. Cell phones have been on a rise to the point where they are now over the last probably 15 years. We have more cell phones than cars because even third world nations have cell phones. You would think there would be an absolute proportion of brain cancer problems or raises in other radiation related problems or any type of health risk. And we haven't seen it at all. The curve in the exponential growth of cell phone usage has not also caused a exponential growth in cancers or anything related to cell phone usage. So it's safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think some of this comes from? Because I see all walks of life sharing this stuff. I've seen people with college degrees, people who, you would think should know to do a little bit of research before you share. And I've seen people, as I said, like of all walks of life share this stuff. What is it that like calls to folks to share these kind of conspiracy theories? And we're seeing more of them even with the coronavirus and things like that, medical ones. We won't get into as many of those because we'll talk to those with a doctor. But like what's driving this proliferation of true fake news?
It's interesting because there's more and more psychology majors. Like there's a lot of psychology into this, and it's a very new science, so to speak, studying people who believe conspiracy theories. Because the most puzzling thing to me is, like you said, very educated people believe this, and I have some friends who believe some outlandish things, but they are well read, well educated, have jobs that are technical, and believe some pretty absurd things. I think a lot of it is being part of or believing conspiracy theory makes people feel special. They want to believe they're part of a repressed group of people that know better than the rest of us, that they have a special understanding of the world that the general population doesn't. But the truth is a lot simpler. They just fear not knowing the answers, I think, is like a fundamental piece. I mean, the smartest people I know, some of the greatest scientists, you listen to them speak, I don't know, someone will ask a question during a lecture of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he'll say, I don't know. And I'm like, I love that. Here's a guy who's top of the game on astrophysics, and he'll say, I don't know to an answer. That's brilliant. But some people, they mentally go, I can't say I don't know, so I have to fill in all the gaps and do this. And then combine that with social media, and the internet has become so easy to use. Years ago, the arbiters of what was easy, accessible information. You either had to publish it in a book, which was not easy even 20 years ago. It was not easy to go get a book published and distributed. Broadcast news, well, that was really limited. Not anyone could just broadcast news. But now Facebook and the internet as a whole have become so truly easy to use. Even the uneducated masses have a voice to loudly display things, and they do. So anyone can just publish a website. I mean, it takes almost nothing to buy a domain, buy a website, publish it, make it look legit. It's so easy to do.
And to be clear, it's not like you're somebody who's against independent media. Part of your livelihood, part of your company is producing independent media. So you're not saying that independent media isn't a thing, right?
Right. No. Matter of fact, I think one of the things I love is independent media because I believe it can speak a lot more truth to things. And that is also what people use. Well, big media is against me or big pharma is against me, whatever they want to say. And honestly, I think that the answer to this right now is more information, get more good information out there, keep pushing it like you're doing here. You're independent media. This is, I'm independent media for the technology videos I produce and things like that. And even some of the niche down into what I do for a living, doing tech videos, I've seen a lot of misinformation out there. So I decided to build a YouTube channel that had very accurate information. And I quickly outpaced some of the ones producing poor information out there. So I still think that there's very much independent media is still a great solution to this. And more is better, but it is still some scientific method and needs to be applied and let people know and let people think for themselves is still really important. But you just have to realize that a lot of people are, like you said at the very beginning, confirmation biasing their way into these conspiracy theories.
So if you're on Facebook, as a lot of people are right now, scrolling through, what are some of the tips for people to help defend themselves against falling for this, sharing this, and also dealing with this? Like, what are some shields people can put up to help them wade through the muck?
Well, there's a couple of them. Let's talk about it. So we mentioned confirmation bias, and a lot of times you're not seeking out alternative opinions. You're just reiterating your own and finding your own confirmations. There's also the proportionality bias, the inclination to believe that big events must have causes. It's okay to accept that just because this is happening, it's just a virus. I mean, it's terrible, it's tragic. It's just a virus, though, and viruses do what viruses do. They infect hosts. It doesn't mean there's some secret agency doing it. Sometimes things just happen, and you can accept that.
I mean, we've had a good number of plagues and diseases over human history. I mean, if you look back, the last 60 years since World War II, we've actually, as a species, had it pretty good comparatively.
Oh, yeah. And we're after World War One. You look at 1918 Spanish flu. That was devastating, and there's been a lot of dives into that. And you look at a lot of its international travel and things like that. And by the way, there was no 5G in 1918. I feel confident about that. There was no cell phones.
There was no 5G during the Great Plague in the Middle Ages.
That's true too. This is just part of it. There's not like some secret conspirators at work here. The other problem is the illusory pattern perception, the tendency for people to see casual relations where there's not any. And this is that back to they keep trying to draw a conclusion to things and can't just accept that, well, these two independent events happened. 5G was rolling out. A virus happened. There's no pattern to this. It just happened to happen because remember swine flu. We weren't rolling out 5G when swine flu came either. So, granted, it wasn't at the same epic proportion that we have now, but that. The couple other tips I would say, especially on Facebook, is I see these people, and this goes to a broader spectrum of conspiracies, is all of our phones have really, really high-res cameras on them. But you'll see these blurry photos that are hard to make out, and people claim to be true. And I'm like, really? Do conspiracy theory people only have low-res cameras? I mean, just stop and take for a second. Or when they always show like something blurred or skewed. And one of the reasons they blur and skew things, and they take a picture of something like some type of document, but they don't take a nice head-on clear picture of it, is to get by the automated systems that Facebook has to filter these. Facebook filters the different text and things like that. But when you start skewing text, make it low res and blurry and hard to read, the automated systems have a hard time reading what that is. So Facebook may not block it. Facebook says they've been blocking almost, was it 1 million accounts a day? Some incredible number I've seen in the news for how much Facebook is trying to edit and stop the spread of misinformation on their site across all types of misinformation. But these are the way people know they can game the system. If I take a low-res photo that's harder to determine that it was posted before, that it was also false news before, or I take a blurry photo of a thing, and then I also put the burden of proof on you to prove me true. I'm saying that this glass I'm holding that is clear is red. Prove to me it's not red. That once you start with that, you're not linking to any sources. Those are all, flags you can say, okay, that person's probably posting misinformation. They've taken something blurry. They've posted an image of text instead of the actual text. They don't link to the Twitter account that allegedly tweeted it. That's one of my favorites. Oh, look at this person said this. And I frequently say, no, they didn't. Look at their Twitter account. You can do a fake Twitter, fake Facebook post generator and claim people said things that they didn't. So always look for sources. If they're not linking to any legit real sources, especially like in the coronavirus, the CDC is a very legit source. Those are all flags that you should say, okay, this is probably a conspiracy right here. This is probably false information or half-truth information.
Well, and sometimes I wonder about the algorithm and Facebook and Twitter in general. Not as much Twitter, but definitely on Facebook, posts seem to get penalized if they have links, which kind of drives me crazy as somebody who's like, oh, if we're going to disseminate information and yet we're not going to include the background and we're going to hurt those.
You're absolutely right about that. And this is one of the problems Facebook has created for themselves is they want you engaging on their site. They don't want you leaving. Therefore, anytime you click something, you have now left their little world. So there is a bias to keep things on the site for sure. And that is something I've noticed as well as when you post links, it sometimes is harder. I do find the way around it is if you post an image and then post the link, it seems to do much better. That's me, and other people talking about this. We've been gaming the system a little bit. And if you notice, I don't usually post a link when I talk about things. I post a picture and then a link. And
or drop a link in the comments.
Yeah, you drop a link in the comments. Those things help a lot because you're right. Facebook is kind of their own worst enemy in some of that. Of their goal of keeping you on the site has now led people to having to game it. But of course, this goes back to the conspiracy people who want to game it as well.
Well, Tom, it has been an interesting and lively conversation with you as always. Where can people find all of your work? Because you're doing stuff every day.
Every day. You can find everything about me, my company, over at lawrencesystems.com. It has links to my Twitter accounts and all my YouTube pages and all the articles and forums and everything that we, media that we create, mostly is deep dives into technology and training and teaching people how to use it.
Coming up in your podcast feed, the team is going to get together virtually and talk about some of our favorite stay-at-home cocktails to level up your home bartending game, all with ingredients you should be able to find pretty easily. And of course, updates and news on what's going on out there. We're not going to abandon the serious stuff, of course. It's important to talk about, but I also know sometimes we need a little bit of a break. Well, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other. We'll get through this together. Talk with you tomorrow.